Hey everybody, it's PartyElite with another online battle today. This time I try something a little tricksy with a Skaven against my opponent, Division Lipetsk, who leads Clan Angrund. We begin, as always, with conversation about composition and deployment, and as I said, my Skaven are doing something a little tricksy, so let's start with my rats. Queek Headtaker is in charge on the left flank over here, with a Warlock Engineer providing magical and Doom Rocket support from the right flank. In the center, 3 units of Skaven Slaves, and right behind them, a pair of Deathglow Bombardiers with that magical armor-piercing damage. Doom Wheels on either flank, able to push forward and create a little bit of tension, hoping to tear the enemy army apart as well as the opponent's attention. But the real meat of the army, apart from Queek of course, is a set of 5 Death Runners. These guys can Vanguard deploy, they've got stock, and they've got concealment bombs, allowing me to creep forward and not get spotted until I'm right in the Dwarfs' faces. Now let's take a look at their formation. A little bit of a box going on, or rather a literal box going on, but what can we expect? Belegar Ironhammer is in charge, providing some melee support to this left flank, while King Loon Ironhammer is here, providing support to that right flank. And right in the center, we do have Throny Ironbrow, bringing that runic support. Great positioning there, able to help most of the army out. Up front, meanwhile, we have this cannon, free to fire away right from the start, completely unobstructed line of fire. Right behind it, though, we've got 3 units of Dwarf Warriors, and on either flank as well, a unit of Dwarf Warriors, and here, Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. Behind that, another layer of long beards with great weapons, and over here, we actually have the Grumbling Guard. So, a little bit stronger on the right here. Would have been a good idea to maybe split up the Regiments of Renown to provide equal strength to both sides. Then all the way at the back, Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, as well as these Hammerers providing a blockage to the rear entry. And finally, the Iron Drakes in the center here, able to provide that fiery range support from a safe space in the center. So let's see how we can tear that box apart. Right away, of course, the cannon is going to open fire, but it can only shoot what it can see, which isn't much really. So it opens its shots off and getting a little bit of damage into some Skaven Slaves, and I'm not really concerned. Meanwhile, the Doom Wheels waiting for them to creep up, and I split my army apart up front here, these Death Runners pushing to either side, hoping that by spotting this unit of Death Runners, or these 2 units of Death Runners, my opponent might be tempted to push off, to peel 1 unit aside or peel a couple of units aside and start breaking that box, as both of my Doom Wheels arrive as well, hoping to again create some tension, forcing the enemy apart. Unfortunately, no such luck, staying in the box, and now the cannon turns its attention, firing instead at the Warlock Engineer, and you'll see a couple of shots do come through and do a little bit of damage to the Warlock Engineer, immediately eliciting a response, of course. Warlock Engineer is not happy about that, and again, I do want to try and tear the enemy apart, and you'll see Crack's Call goes down. A decent amount of armor-piercing damage can be expected from Crack's Call, and I'm hoping, again, that the Dwarf Warriors will push out and maybe give chase, maybe charge into some of the Skaven Slaves, but instead, I get some great micromanagement from my opponent instead. Crack's Call comes in, does a minimal amount of damage, and even though they spot the Death Runners, they decide to peel back and stay in position. So, good job there, staying in formation, not breaking away from the plan, and at the same time, you'll see the Doom Wheels getting into an excellent position now, able to push in and get some rear charges once they break through the enemy lines, but I ultimately pop concealment bombs, and you'll see the Death Runners creep in closer and closer, and concealment bombs keep them hidden until they are basically at point-blank range. No range fire able to come in. The Iron Drakes aren't able to get any work done. By the time these units are spotted, the Iron Drakes aren't even able to get ready to open fire. You'll see, in fact, as these Death Runners come charging in, I actually have these pair of Death Runners over here still not being spotted. Meanwhile, on the right flank over here, wonderful play. Throny Ironbrow pops Rune of Oath and Steel. Good thinking there. The plus 30 armor is going to help out. Unfortunately, though, Death Runners are armor-piercing, and they have Weeping Blade, reducing enemy armor by 50%. So, a futile attempt there, but you'll see, perhaps more interestingly, the Doom Wheels now turn their attention to the actual enemy forces, pushing in as these Death Runners push in as well. And look how long it takes before they actually get spotted. No reaction time, no reaction from the Iron Drakes, and as these Dwarf Warriors with great weapons push in towards my Death Runners, that provides an opening for my Doom Wheel to come crashing through right into these Hammerers as the other Doom Wheel pushes in and gets right into the center of that box. Skaven Slaves now pile in just to provide some extra support, while the Deathglow Bombardiers as well, bombing away, trying to break that center as a Doom Wheel as well, providing some support, exploding some Dwarfs in the center there, while charging into this right flank, again, hoping to create a nice gaping hole here, and you'll see that rear charge comes in and does a decent amount of morale damage, of course, but also kicks in fear and terror, and there goes that right flank. The Dwarf Warriors giving up, they want to leave right away. In the center as well, as my Skaven Slaves give up to fear and terror, so too do the Dwarf Warriors in the center. So Doom Wheels have done their job, and now peeling back here to provide some support to these Death Runners back here against the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, but the Deathglow Bombardiers continuing to focus away down this line, just firing away, trying to take care of some of these extremely highly ranked enemy units. In the center, Belegar Ironhammer not providing support to his Dwarven forces, so my Skaven slaves are able to push through and get right into the meat of this box. It is no longer a box, it is now 2 lines. Crack's Call comes through, and again, doesn't do a good enough amount of damage to make it worthwhile. You'll see they do drop a little bit in health, these 2 units, killing only 1 dwarf, so I'm not entirely dissatisfied with it, but a better cast there could have done a lot more work. Meanwhile, back here, you'll see I do have a unit of Death Runners just standing there, looking pretty, not doing anything, absolutely wasted there. Should have been sent back in, while Queek Headtaker himself is getting involved against quite a few enemy forces, while all the way over here, we do have Warp Lightning kicking in from the Warlock Engineer, focusing in on the Hammerers, a very high threat unit, but doing more work against the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. Again, not too dissatisfied, basically dropping that unit to a 1/5 of its health. Wonderfully done. The Doom Wheels, meanwhile, continue to give chase to various units, trying to bring that fear and terror around the field, provide support wherever possible, and you'll see Queek now engaging Belegar Ironhammer. So an ideal situation for Queek, of course, because he is armor-piercing, he is anti-infantry, so he'll have an absolutely wonderful time against Belegar Ironhammer, while in the center here, you'll see Throny once again using the Rune of Oath and Steel, helping against the Skaven slaves, of course, but the Death Runners not minding too much. The Doom Wheel, meanwhile, pulling away, and again pushing in to provide support to Queek, continuing to scare some of these units away, and also using its magical ammunition, hopefully if it targets properly, against these ethereal enemy heroes. Now on the right flank once again, bringing in Warp Lightning, hoping to scare some of these units off, cause enough damage to break morale with a Doom Wheel right back there as well, able to push in now and charge into these guys and finish them off, finish off their will to fight rather. The Deathglow Bombardiers, however, a major mistake from myself, not focusing on the ethereal enemy units. For some reason, it just did not occur to me. I did not realize that I was up against some ghosts, and I did not focus that magical damage properly. The Iron Drakes finally getting some damage in, firing away at Queek Headtaker here, and finally you can see the Deathglow Bombardiers firing away at some of these ethereal units, but it took a very long time for me to get there. The Doom Wheel, meanwhile, both of them in the center here, just looking for their next target, looking for where to go next, and you'll see I split them apart, send one against the Iron Drakes to shut down that range support, and the other one over here pushing into Throny Ironbrow. Meanwhile, I do pop a rocket as well. The Doom Rocket comes through, and unfortunately, not able to get a perfect cast. You'll see in just a moment's time, the Warlock Engineer opens up fire with the Doom Rocket, and you'll see it goes in, and I do like the Doom Rocket, but unfortunately this one is completely flubbed, hitting nothing but grass, so unfortunately a wasted Doom Rocket there, but the Doom Wheels are doing a lot of work again, chasing various units, trying to turn these routes into shatters and these willful fighters into cowards. You'll see in the center, once again, Throny Ironbrow using the Rune of Oath and Steel just to provide some protection, I guess, to Belegar Ironhammer. Not much else he can do. He needs to be pulled back to provide support to the rest of this army, as the Doom Wheels are extremely threatening. The Deathglow Bombardiers as well now, very low on ammo, this one unit, but again, able to push in, and good call using the Rune of Wrath and Ruin on this unit of Deathglow Bombardiers just to try and hurt them and get them off the field to remove that range support. Very, very crucial, especially since they are magical as well as armor-piercing damage. The Doom Wheels, meanwhile, you can see continue to give chase to various units, trying to close down these Iron Drakes, make sure they're not able to fire in, literally and figuratively, to any of my forces. The Deathglow Bombardiers now firing away as well into these Longbeards with great weapons, a threatening unit to be sure, but again, I should have been focusing on Throny Ironbrow, or more importantly, King Lune Ironhammer, a Thane who is also ethereal, a very dangerous unit on the field. This Doom Wheel, however, is now being bogged down, but fires away at Lune Ironhammer and is now able to turn around and try and get away. Both Doom Wheels now very much in close proximity, but trying to use that fear and terror to break the army as it clumps in around those two Doom Wheels, and you'll see they do start to rout. So it works out wonderfully in my favor. A little bit more magical damage coming in from that Doom Wheel firing away, and you'll see most of the Dwarf army now has given up. Throny Ironbrow a little too late to the party, popping Rune of Oath and Steel, using Rally, trying to bring everybody back into the fray, but unfortunately these routes are not going to return. Of course, these routers do not wish to fight anymore, and as this Doom Wheel gives chase, I realize that I do not have, well, I don't have enough giving chase, so this Doom Wheel actually gets reassigned to try and turn these routes into shatters, as these Death Runners now focusing in on whatever they can. Again, I can't do too much work against the ethereal units unless I'm using some magical damage, but I send everything in against this clump. If I can scare Belegar Ironhammer off, I'm hoping to get enough morale damage done to turn most of these routes into shatters and maybe break my opponent's will to fight. Queek Headtaker once again returning to the fray as well after having routed a moment ago after being hit by fear and terror, not that he'd admit it, and you'll see we're just getting a full surround, or trying to get a full surround on this clump of ghosts and Belegar Ironhammer himself. So Queek goes diving in, and the Warlock Engineer as well in a moment's time is going to push in. You'll see we pop Dwarf Gouger and Stand Your Ground, just trying to keep these guys fighting and increasing that armor-piercing damage of Queek himself, while all of these routes are slowly turning into shatters. So this is all working out for me. But in the center, after Belegar is taken care of, Queek is going to be in a bit of a tight spot. You'll see he's already starting to lose this situation here as the Deathglow Bombardiers continue to provide some support. This is where I think I finally realize I need to be focusing on these ethereal units, but we are far too low on ammunition at this point. And there goes Belegar, Ironhammer, a coward, routing, completely shattered, and Queek is in a bit of a tight spot, of course. He does get hit by the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, just slowly causing some damage, but that's not the best call, to be honest. Should have been used against some of my Deathglow Bombardiers, perhaps. And we also have the Hammer of Karak Draz, which is reducing his capabilities and his weapon damage, reducing his melee attack and weapon damage. So I use Death Frenzy not only to counter that and increase melee attack and weapon damage, but also give him an immunity to psychology. He is surrounded by 2 ghosts right now, and even though he won't admit it, Queek does get scared. So we're using that to provide him that immunity to fear and terror, and in comes the Warlock Engineer as well, looking for a chance to pop that wonderful lightning of his, trying to get some magical damage in, and you'll see the rest of the army does pour in, does just charge in, trying to get a full surround. These guys are not going to give up. I have to cause damage, and now you'll see I pull Queek aside, try to get him out of this very dangerous situation as I bring that Warp Lightning in, and again, does minimal damage, killing more of my rats than anything else. But at this point, it's just a battle of attrition. You'll see the Thane does drop. All we have left is Throny Ironbrow, but unfortunately, that's not enough. And I do have to give it to my opponent for sticking around and fighting, because an ethereal hero can be extremely devastating. If Queek had fallen, that would be the end of my army, I think, and the Dwarfs would have won. But it is a Pyrrhic victory for my Skaven. The plans I had worked out more or less how I'd hoped. Most of my army, at least the heavy hitters, couldn't be targeted by artillery or range support, and my Doom Wheels were able to easily harass the Dwarven lines without issue. Death Runners are absolutely fantastic against Dwarfs because of the Weeping Blade alongside the armor-piercing capabilities, and their stalking is great to avoid being hurt before lines meet, especially with the added sneakiness of using concealment bombs. Even if my opponent brought in a pair of Slayers, I think I would have come out on top just fine. After all, that's what the slaves were there for originally. My biggest mistake was not focusing on the ethereal ancestors with magical range damage sooner, but the Deathglow Bombardiers did well enough to help shatter the Dwarf army that it all worked out in the end. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content, online battles, and Total Breakdown, bringing you a constant flow of tactical analysis and advice, and naturally, we're always keeping an eye out to the horizon. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to meeting you on the battlefield.